Hello, and welcome to a slight change of plan here. I actually don't think I wrote an opening monologue for this one, but this was a bit of a last minute change, so I didn't really have a whole lot that I would have planned necessarily to say about it either. So here you go. Since I didn't write an opening monologue, I didn't write down my title. I think it was Trump card versus actual nuclear option. But this is HBR Talk 339, and where we're going to talk about an article that was sent to me. And I guess I should tell you guys that part, because that's kind of relevant to why we're doing this. This article, I missed this, because I don't really keep track of Newsweek that much. Newsweek is not a neutral news source. It is a left-wing news source. And it's not, there's not really a lot of neutral news sources. They're either mostly left-wing or right-wing. But Newsweek is they would be very anti-Trump. And they would be very anti-Republican and so on, and very pro-Democrat. But they do it in a way that they thought was subtle. And this kind of doesn't do that. It's a little different. So it did fly under my radar, but one of my Twitter followers who is, I've got Twitter followers who are straight up MRAs, and I've got Twitter followers who are neither MRA nor feminist. They're not left, they're not right, they're supporters from the Gamergate controversy. They're from the consumer side of the Gamergate controversy, right? And then I've got MAGA supporters, MAGA followers, and this one lady who is a fellow gen-Xer who is, she just started to wake up to a lot of this stuff during the 2020 snafu. I don't know how much. And I guess we did come right out and call it stolen last Monday. Monday was the day that we did the live stream from Virginia.
Stolen.
Yeah,
because it was.
That woke her up to a whole bunch of things. But the fact that happened, and the gaslighting afterward, and all of the stuff that occurred after that election. There's a lot of people prior to that election that probably wouldn't even have noticed a lot of the stuff that we notice. Wouldn't have cared enough to look for it, right? So she sent me this with a message that was basically, I don't get in necessarily to the men's issue stuff, but I've seen that you do, and I think you might be interested in this article. And the first thing I thought about it was, meteor hits the Earth, women most affected. And this is, nuclear war kills everybody. Men don't survive longer or anything than women. But it doesn't actually kill everybody right away. And there are, depending on just how bad it is, whether it's, two countries going at it with each other, or multiple countries going at it with each other.
The general trend in a nuclear explosion is men run towards it and women run away from it.
Yeah,
and that's where they don't quite understand the problem. Because if you run towards it, you die quickly. If you run away from it, you die slowly in some
agony,
indescribable agony. Yes. So once we go nuclear, we escape the gynocentric traditions of old, if you can even call them traditions, which I suppose they are. But everything changes when it goes nuclear. The cockroaches take over.
But there is a men's issue. Actually, there's a few men's issues in this, and the first most obvious one is that when we look at who is responsible for stopping a nuclear war, who is responsible for preventing this from happening, and you look at who is in politics, who is in charge, right? Feminists always complain that we still live in a patriarchy because the seats of power are mostly held by men. Right? That's one of their chief complaints, is that we are still in a patriarchy because most of Congress is men, few world leaders are women, and so on. Right? You don't see most of the people who run the judicial system, most of the people who make the top decisions in the judicial system, they're mostly men. There are more men than women most of the time, and have been for most of history. And okay, that's fine, you can complain about that right now. What that means is that most of the people whose responsibility it is to protect the public by engaging in diplomacy one way or another, whether it's, carrying a big stick or actually being able to offer compromise, and being able to come to agreements with other nations. It's men. Men are the people on whose backs that weight is carried most of the time. So that's the first one. The second one is, before war goes nuclear, it very often goes red. And it's men's blood who is more likely to get spilled, right? It's men's... When they say boots on the ground, they really mean asses on the line. They really mean lives on the line, right? And it's mostly men's lives. It's almost exclusively men's lives. Because even the 14% of the U.S. military that are women, most of those women, the overwhelming majority of those women, are not going to be in combat roles, and they're not going to be in roles where they're going to be in danger of going into combat, even if they weren't expected to. It's going to be men that are going to fill the most dangerous positions, right? And the people that are sitting behind desks trying to help direct those men, a lot of those may be women, right? Well, among the 14%. But, it's not the same being the one on a computer looking at satellite imagery and telling men where the guys that are shooting at them are shooting from, versus being the person who's getting shot at. Right? So we were in that situation as a nation of almost going to war. We were in that situation as a nation of dealing with, are we going to have a draft? Are we going to send our young men overseas after screwing them up so badly that they're not even sure what sex they are? We're going to send them overseas to fight in a war? Because that was coming up. So that's a big men's issue. And then probably the least obvious one would be, what happens if some people do survive the nuclear war? What happens if people survive and are in a position where, they're going to be able to actually outlast the fallout where they are? What happens if, they got to rebuild? What happens if they've got to survive that? Who's going to be the ones doing that? Because it's not going to be women. So there are some men's issues in this. So I can understand why she did send it to me. But it's encouraging in a way. I don't necessarily... It's like I said with Trump. I'm not holding my breath. I'm really, really happy with a lot of the stuff that he's done. But I'm not holding my breath on the right listening to us. But this indicates that at least some of them are more aware of these issues than we thought. And there may be a chance, there's probably a pretty good chance on some issues to get them to listen to us. So with that, I'm going to get us into the article. I'm going to move this up. I already showed you guys that it was Newsweek.
They ask us, are you tired of winning? And I say, sir, we have not yet begun to win.
There you go. Yeah, that's one. I know they're still... The right is too white-pilled too early. I will say that. I have hope, though. I do have hope. I have more hope than I had before the election, and I have more hope than I have had before the inauguration. So, not gonna say that it's not better. It's just I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop in politics. It's just I always am. And somebody's already tried to introduce a bill to create an amendment to the Constitution that'll have to be ratified through the usual process and everything, to allow Trump a third term. I don't like that. I hope he comes back and says don't do that, because I'm looking at it a couple of ways. First of all, if he gets a third term, anybody else that comes along after him can also, and that's bad.
One of the biggest problems of Congress is that it's full of ancient, fucking barely animate golems.
Yeah, like Cecil the Turtle. Yeah, I mean McConnell, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, Glitch McConnell and all these sorts. The problem isn't that the president should have more terms. It's that all of these ghouls should have fewer terms. Why is it only the president that gets no more than 8 years? 8 years is good for everyone. Why can't we get a revolving door in all of these places? If it works for the goose, it works for what's the word for baby geese? I don't know.
Goslings.
Goslings.
Yes.
There we go.
And we have an actor named after baby geese here in the U.S. But in any case, yeah, as far as that goes, the first thing is nobody should have that much power for that long in the United States. I understand other countries do that, and they're fine with it, but that's not the way that we ever intended to do things here. And the first president of the United States sort of set a precedent by refusing to be named king. They offered him, and he said no. So it's something that if somebody wanted to be in power forever, or 15 years is a long time, right? 14 or 12 years is a long time. Not 15 years. I'm thinking of 5-year terms, but 12 years is a long time. But the other aspect of it is this, right? Nobody should have to bear that responsibility for that long. That should be something that, like the baton in a relay race, you should be able to hand off to the next person. You ran your part. You did your part. And you can see from every president our generation has watched deal with the issues of the United States and foreign policy and all that, they come out looking like they got ran over by a train, right? Mm-hmm. They don't come out looking better, and they're aging, yeah, but there's a lot to deal with in that job. It is an immense responsibility, and nobody's shoulders should have to bear it for more than 8 years, if they're willing to bear it for 8 years. So, and of course the other thing is, a president shouldn't need a third term, right? If his ideas and his goals and interests are popular enough that someone else with the same values can get in, and he can pass the torch, and that torch can be carried. He can pass the baton, and that baton can be carried by the next person. Then those ideas deserve another term, right? But if the public cannot support those ideas with another baton carrier, another torch bearer, then they should be extinguished, at least until people decide they need them again. All right, OBS is fucking up. I don't know what's going on.
And we should extend this to those of us who have...
Hold on, because chat just died in OBS. I need to see chat on my desktop computer tell me that they can still hear us. Because I don't know what's going on with OBS, but it looks like it's not streaming. So I'm watching. I'm watching
watching the YouTube too, and I think they can hear us.
I hope they can hear us. It's going to take 30 seconds to find out. Yes. Yeah. Okay. What? Yes. What? Okay. Yes. We said a bunch of stuff. Yes. What? We can hear you. They said they can hear us. Okay. Go on, Mike. I'm so sorry.
Oh fuck! What was I even saying? God.
Why it's doing that? All right, so what I was talking about was term limits. And it basically said, if the ideas cannot continue on without that one leader, then not enough people value them, not enough people want them, and they should be allowed to fade instead of him carrying that torch forever. Does that help?
I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. This is why I write things down.
Sorry.
before I go on, because it's my fault entirely. I'm an alcoholic. I have a very poor short-term memory, and that's nobody's fault but mine. Maybe it'll come back to me as the conversation continues. Let us continue the conversation.
All right. All right, so I actually want to just get into the article, but I will point that out with regard to that term thing, because that's one thing I don't want to see people doing that, and I do hope Trump comes out and says, please don't do that, because I don't want to do that, because the man does deserve, a well-earned rest. If he achieves a third of what he wants to get done, a quarter of what he wants to get done in the next 4 years, which I think he may have done that the first day. He deserves to retire and just get to be, whatever he wants to be after that for however long he is alive. And there are people waiting to carry that torch, so I'm not worried about it. But people really need to back off on the idea of putting that burden on somebody for years and years. So our article here, let me get this stupid window to comply. There we go. Got 3 windows open on this laptop, and they're all big enough that they overlap. So that's me doing the delay while I get the window forward so you guys can see it, or so I can read it rather. Putin ally warns nuclear war with NATO almost began under Joe Biden. And I do want to remind you guys, Joe Biden gave the okay for Ukraine to bomb Russia with our missiles. Right before, it's after the election, right? Right before the inauguration. So, I had to look up how to pronounce this guy's name. And I'm going to play it because actually what I found was interesting. Just this part right here. Or actually, no, the beginning was what I found was interesting. There we go. If I can get it to play. It played just fine when I wasn't live streaming. I even tested it. So annoying.
In Russian, his name is pronounced Dmitry Medvedev.
Alright, so I'm going to have a rough time with that. Medvedev. I know it's a Russian pronunciation of a Russian word, and I think the English type pronunciation is just Medvedev, but I'm going to try to do the Medvedev.
It's fucking Dmitry Medvedev. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can do it in your own accent. It's fine. Dmitry Medvedev.
Well, in Ohio, I want you to remember, I am from Ohio, where we have a community just north of where I live, okay, that is called Versailles. It is spelled Versailles.
And you have a Lima, yes.
Yes, we have a Lima. not a
And that's
lemur.
fine. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to anglicize things. So we're allowed to anglicize Dmitry Medvedev.
So what was interesting to me was this part. Play, damn it. Really? Alright, so I'm not going to play it. But it gave his history. Now, I've looked up how to pronounce a lot of different names and stuff. And the videos on how to pronounce them, and they just say the name over and over again. And it's often a person whose primary language is English. Like, I can't say Americans are necessarily English because a lot of us have other nationalities as our primary background, and what we speak is not English. But this is the first one I've come across that actually gives information about the person. I thought that was kind of neat. I wish more videos about how to pronounce people's names did that. So, this is the former Russian Prime Minister, Dmitry, let me see if I can do this right, Medvedev. I've already forgotten it. I'm really bad at that. So I will start calling him DM. Somebody suggested DM, which makes him sound like the Dungeon Master, which is really cool, so I'll do that. A close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Sunday that a nuclear war with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, almost began under President Joe Biden. Newsweek has reached out to the White House and Russia's foreign ministry via email for comment on Sunday morning. And this was written, by the way, we look at this, I think it was before, it was January 19th. So this was published on January 19th, and then it was updated further in the afternoon. So this was before the inauguration. And yeah, Derek Workman pointed out there is no one American accent. There are thousands. There are thousands of American accents. And in fact, if I go a few streets over, people have a different accent in the same city.
But it has to be said, this is even more pronounced in the UK.
Yeah.
Because, the USA is huge, and, the difference between Californian and Southern and East Coast and Middle America, it's a much narrower gap than between the people at the top of Scotland and the people at the bottom of England.
Yeah, just don't make me tell the Iron Machine story again.
Yes, I know. Iron your tires.
Iron your tires.
And weirdly, there's a much broader range of accents in Britain, and yet weirdly we still understand each other.
Yes, and it's important though, if you're going to go on a long trip, that you should make sure there's ire in your tars and oil. You got to make sure you check your oil. Earl. Yeah, well, that's a different part of the country. Check your Earl.
That's where my family's from.
Yeah. But after you check your Earl, if you're going to check your Earl, you got to wash your hands.
Yes.
That's wash for the rest of the country. And of course, if you're going to wash your hands, you're going to wash them in water. My grandparents were from New York. So, my living grandparents were from New York, because I didn't meet the grandparents on the other side of the family. They all passed. But, yeah, one side of my family lives really long. The other side of my family lives like, it doesn't really matter if there's going to be a nuclear war. So, why it matters. Tensions remain high between NATO and Russia amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. We all know that part, as NATO leaders have increasingly warned that direct conflict with Moscow is a real danger. This comes after Putin and senior Russian officials have repeatedly threatened nuclear escalation against Kiev and its Western partners since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. And I want to remind you guys, last week we were talking about China's concerns about this and how careful they are being to not openly appear to be siding with Russia while they side with Russia. Like, they're they're actually tiptoeing around this, and that's kind of creepy too, right? They're usually not quite that tiptoey. They usually make threats to us. So the tensions come as Russia and the United States have control over roughly 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. The other 10%, including a significant portion, by the way, this is not in the article, but I will point this out, that got lost after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there are also nuclear weapons out there that we don't know where they are, or who has them, or what they might want to do with them. So, and of course, since the collapse, there's probably more nuclear weapons in Russia that we don't know about as well. This includes strategic and non-strategic or tactical nuclear weapons. President-elect Donald Trump, who takes office on Monday, has criticized the billions of dollars the Biden administration has spent in supporting Ukraine, has said that if he was negotiating at the negotiating table with Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the war between the two nations would end within 24 hours, leading to concerns that he would press Zelensky to surrender the territory Russia currently occupies. So we're going to stop there for a minute. All right, so we've talked about this before too. Remember, the history of the territory that they're fighting over is that Ukraine was part of Russia. It wasn't just part of the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, then Ukraine became a country. And during the Obama administration, the American government overthrew, essentially, the existing Ukrainian government, installed Zelensky, who I will remind everybody is basically the Pee Wee Herman of his country. Like, before, if you go back and you look at some of Paul Rubin's old Gong Show material, and then you look at the old acting material that is out there from Zelensky, you will understand what I'm talking about. Right? They put him in charge, and Russian nationals in Crimea rejected his leadership. That area voted to break off from Ukraine and become part of Russia, and the United States paid holy warriors from Afghanistan I also want you to remember our interference in the Afghanistan Civil War in the 1980s, where we had our holy warriors and Russia had their holy warriors fighting with each other. It wasn't just their civil war. It was a civil war between the United States and Russia in another country, basically. Not so civil, huh? So we had people that we took, our CIA took from those conflicts, those holy warriors that they had recruited to send to genocide the Russian nationals in Crimea to put down a revolt against Zelensky. That's the history behind this war. Right? So Russia going in and attacking, it puts it into perspective. You have Zelensky wanting to put NATO bases on Russia's doorstep, and you also have a portion of the country he claims to rule over wanting to defect to Russia. And you have the United States interfering. If the United States wasn't interfering at all, if there was zero U.S. interference, if there was zero NATO interference, the question becomes who would be in charge of Ukraine? Would it be a nation? Would it have just gone back to Russia? So when we read that there are concerns, it says leading to concerns. It doesn't say whose concerns, right? There are concerns that he would press Zelensky to surrender the territory Russia currently occupies. I'm not. I wouldn't be upset about that. I'm not going to complain if that's what happens, right? It's not our business. What is our business is, we shouldn't be supporting defense of it against Russia. We actually shouldn't be supporting efforts to take it back. Like, if we are supporting efforts to take it back, then we are at war with Russia. So, from my perspective, I'm not. This isn't something that upsets me to read. Concerns that he would press Zelensky to surrender the territory Russia currently occupies. If that's what it takes to end the war, maybe that's what should happen. Is it even legitimately territory that Zelensky has a right to control over? And whether it is or not, is it our responsibility to support his efforts at regaining it? Is it the responsibility of our sons? Do the 18-year-old boys that voted for Trump for the first time this year have a right to expect him to do whatever it takes to keep them from having to go to war? I mean, does anybody disagree with me on that?
No. You have to wonder how many lives and how many hundreds of billions could have been saved if there was someone in there who could have just gone, okay, you could have Crimea, you could have that, you could have the Donbass region, you could have that bit in the southeast that's mostly occupied by ethnic Russians anyway, and there never needed to have been a war. And you can't help but wonder if Trump was not legitimately lost the election, if all of this would have been prevented had the Biden cartel not have come into power in the early days of 2021.
I think it definitely would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Putin would have even done this. I don't think he would have attacked in the first place if Trump had been still in power, or at least he would have waited 6 years, because it happened in 2022.
Trump would have pushed back on that whole, Ukraine trying to join NATO. He would have pushed back on that immediately. Oh, yeah. I just don't see any way that it would have happened had he been able to take his rightful place in the office for the last 4 years. But we can't put that genie back in the bottle. We're here now, and so yeah. I mean, it's obviously I don't like America getting involved in the dealings with other countries, but there are certain situations where it makes sense for us to at least thwart the next world war.
Yeah. Well, it's essentially Trump is being sent now to clean up the mess, right, that previous administrations caused. And it's a sad situation.
I'll be satisfied because there's just no way that he's going to let it continue, right? I just can't see it happening. Putin is already, even before he took office, Putin was already backing off of Ukraine. But I will be happy if we can recover some of those billions of dollars that we sent over there.
We probably will never see a dime of that.
I know. One can dream, though.
Yeah. That's your tax dollars and mine and every man who pays taxes.
Yep.
Like that's all gone. That's just like if you have cash and somebody steals it, you usually don't get that back either, right? You can get back, sometimes you can get back electronic currency that gets stolen, but cash is usually gone by the time the thief gets caught. And this is that situation. The really rough part, with what Trump's going to be facing in terms of the financial end of it is this. There is a complex money laundering scheme that is embedded in the United States' involvement in this war. And the outgoing administration just pardoned pretty much everybody involved in it. So there's not a lot of recourse that can be had against the individuals who committed those crimes. And there's probably not a lot of leverage that can be operated to get to the bottom of that. And all we can really expect is that going forward, hopefully, the current administration will create barriers to any future efforts at doing this again. Like that seems to be, and it's not just a matter of the best we can do. Revenge is kind of useless in a lot of ways. Biden is old. It's too late to punish him for anything. He is at the end of his life. He doesn't know where he is or what he's doing half the time. And he may linger for a long time and then die, or he may die from whatever it is that's making him senile. If it's strokes, it could kill him next week. If it's Alzheimer's, he could last another 10 years with it, and deteriorate the whole time in front of his family and the rest of the country if they are mean enough to put him in public. But not that those are the only two things that can happen that make you senile when you get older. A lot of stuff changes as you get older, and there are several disabling conditions that are genetic. Actually, it's written into a lot of people's DNA that you'll basically mentally turn into a baby before you die. But it sucks, right? But adding punishment on top of that is going to be completely useless because we aren't the kind of country that deliberately causes people to suffer. So anything that we do would be humane incarceration, which would essentially be very little difference from any other nursing care facility, right? You could put him in a prison nursing home versus any other nursing home. I don't think it's going to make a big difference. And then, the same is true with a lot of the other people that were involved in this, that they're either super old or they have fled the country. There are some people that have skipped the country. Or, we can't get the evidence on them, and we're not going to be able to prove what they did because people who would otherwise could have been, compelled to testify against them have been pardoned for any crimes they might have committed or any crimes they might commit. So there you go. Now, as Meredith G. pointed out, there are a lot of lower-level people Biden didn't pardon. Probably because they didn't pay up, like Meredith says, they didn't pay up. But, we can't necessarily... We could go through the entire administration and go all the way down to the bottom, but we don't know if we would be penalizing people who really were involved and really knew what they were involved with, or some poor schlub who carried paper from one office to another a bunch of times and didn't know anything about what was on it. So the best path going forward, really, is to address situations like this, right? To put out all of the fires and to make future administrations as fireproof as we can. And, like I said with Fauci, If we can't prosecute him, we can tear down everything he ever built, because it's all bad. He will have no legacy except for everybody knowing that he was the cause of a pandemic that killed people all around the world. We could also let another country extradite him for prosecution.
Yeah.
Like Meredith
I
said.
suggest India.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if anybody deserves that right, it's India. Holy crap. What they went through.
Good Lord.
Yep. Yeah, Death to Zionism, Feminism, and the Thin Blue Line says Norway has humane incarceration. The U.S. tortures prisoners. There is a great deal of unfortunate truth to that. But what they don't do is take elderly prisoners who are from, who have had a lot of authority, basically, who are famous or otherwise. They don't do that with them. They just are more confined. And unfortunately, I mean, I've worked in the nursing home system, and I don't have a lot of nice things to say about it. Right? As awful as then in my parents' lives ended up, I'm glad they were not in a nursing home.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's not better than the prison system. It's that once you get to the age where people get put in nursing homes, I don't think it's going to be that different. Most nursing home residents can't leave. Not without somebody's help. And so they're at the whim of the people that are taking care of them. And if their family members are not there every day making sure that they're getting good care and they're getting their rights respected in terms of their mobility and everything, they really are in a bad situation, the way that they get treated. It's very wrong, and that whole system needs to be revamped. And honestly, if you have aging parents and there's a way for you to arrange to have a home where they live in part of that home, and you can go in and check on them and have home health care come in instead of them living in a building in some other part of town where they're at the mercy of strangers all day, except for the few hours a day that you might be able to be there, or few minutes. It's better to have them have the extended family situation, even if it's hard, than it is to have them living in a home. If there's not some medical condition where they have to have round-the-clock nursing care, it's better to not put them in it. Obviously, if there's a much different situation there. There's nothing you can do about that except make sure that you keep track of what's going on in that home, because they get stolen from, they get abused, they get treated like their dignity doesn't matter, they get lied to, they get neglected. It's really unfair for that to be the way that a modern civilization treats people at the end of their lives. And it's not just in the so-called bad nursing homes, right? There are nursing homes that are hoity-toity, expensive, supposed to be better than the county home nursing homes, where the same thing happens.
Has anyone else watched the Netflix series Severance recently? I did. We did, and it's you watch it and you think to yourself, this is representing something, and I'm not sure what it is. Briefly, it's about a dystopian vision of the future in which there are some companies whose employees have to undergo this surgery that splits their memory in half, so that when they're at work, they can only remember when they're at work, and when they are on their own time, they can only remember on their own time. And so and so they have two different memories. The one that only it operates at work, and one that only operates at home. And it's a fascinating idea, because it's obviously a metaphor for something else. The obvious idea is that when you go to work, you have this other life that you have separate from your home life, and we assume that's what it's about. But then but it's much worse than that, because if you were to split your brain in half like that, you would get this sense of the everlasting, the unfortunate everlasting, and that is largely what happens in the retirement homes. You get put in there to live with your memories, and when you're at that age, all you really have is your memories, and whatever can trigger those memories in the form of your loved ones and your family members visiting you. And so, yeah, it's in later in the twilight years of the average human being, they get sent into this institution, not even a federal or state level institution, a private institution that sort of does whatever it wants with you, and you end up, well, this is what the popular Netflix series Severance gets across. You sort of experience this dual life where you're sort of reliving your memories of your outside life, and every now and again getting snapped back into your present life, where you're just in not quite a hospital room, but it's a bit like a hospital room. It's this living in the pod and eating the bugs. I mean, you're not eating the bugs yet, but you're definitely living in the pod. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if Biden were to be convicted of something and they were to decide that he's going to be incarcerated because of his age and because of the medical care that he's going to need at this point in his life and going forward, his experience wouldn't be like you would expect. Like if you broke and entered into somebody's house and you got jailed for that in just an ordinary jail, your experience would be worse than what Biden would experience as an elderly dignitary incarcerated in a prison medical facility for the rest of his life. Right. So I hesitate to even suggest that it's a big deal that Biden might not be punished. Like, that this might not go back to him. And a lot of the people that are involved or that were involved in the whole snafu, a lot of them are close to his age, right? A lot of them would be in that same situation. They wouldn't be in the general prison population. They would be in the prison nursing home. They would be in the prison nursing care facility, one way or another. Or they would be pretty close to that. The prison they would go to wouldn't be... They're not going to... Like, people have this fantasy, of, like, the people involved being someplace similar to the gulags that the J6 hostages were kept in. It would be nothing like that. Martha Stewart probably got punished harder than those people will get punished. And she was in a celebrity prison, basically. Right? It may not be a cakewalk in comparison to, like, your everyday life, but I believe the men in high security, high threat, basically, prisons where they send gang members that have killed, probably would consider it a cakewalk. So that's really the point of this is not so much, all the people that maybe deserve to be punished for getting us into this situation, so much as the fact that it's up to us, and by us I don't mean Americans, I mean the men's rights movement, to push men to make sure that women don't override them and make this happen again. Right? It's, guys, women don't pay attention to everything there is to know in politics. They spend all their time thinking about women's issues, and women's issues are not war and due process and equal parenting rights and what happens to the next generation if our education system doesn't properly teach math, what happens to our economy if the next set of workers coming out doesn't know how to work, what happens to the industries that we rely on for our creature comforts. They don't think about that, right? They think about whether or not they can have an abortion and whether or not your tax dollars are going to be used to fund women's shelters. So it's up to you guys. Unfortunately, it is always going to be up to men. Young, old, middle-aged, doesn't matter. It's always going to be up to men to consider, is this man going to send us to war? Is this candidate going to send us to war? Because Kamala Harris was no man. She wouldn't have been able to handle being a man, right? She wouldn't have been able to handle being a 10-year-old boy. But in fact, most women wouldn't be able to handle being a 10-year-old boy, even if they raised boys, right? So it's up to you guys to look at the candidates. What happens if our education system fails? Oh, well, we don't have engineers. We don't have electricians. We don't have carpenters in the future, because you can't go into the trades without understanding math. I can't name a trade that doesn't have some use of math involved in it.
And do bear in mind that the Elon Musks of the world are only just discovering the problem with immigration, the problem with the race-based area of the DEI thing. He still hasn't discovered what MRAs have been talking about for the last 10 years. We're all rather excited about how some of the movers and shakers are finally understanding how the race grift works, and has been working for the last 10, 20, 50 years or so. But they've still no idea about the plight of men. I don't know what to call it, but you know what I mean. But people are figuring out the race grift, but they're still several steps away from figuring out the gender grift, the sex drift, the stuff that we dreaded MRAs have been talking about for the last 10 years. Like, I look forward to when Elon Musk figures that shit out, and when he starts, tweeting out ancient Karen Storm videos.
Yeah.
He goes, have you seen this shit, folks? And did you know that maybe the patriarchy's not actually... So look at this. Her name's Karen Strawn. My God, this is the newest thing I've ever seen. And yeah, I look forward to that revelation, but weirdly, I'm not holding out for it.
No, it could happen. It might never happen. But what is happening is at the other end of the pyramid of social hierarchies, right? You have a fellow Gen Xer who doesn't follow anything to do with men's rights, who sent me an article that didn't explicitly say it was about men's rights, but she recognized that because it was about war and leadership, it was about men. And it was something that was a men's issue that we might want to talk about. Like, that tells me a lot. It's a small white pill, but that's a white pill for me. It's stuck in a big handful of pills of unknown color, right? But yeah, and y'all should be paying attention to Night Motorcyclist in our chat, because he's got a very big point here about the education system and math and everything. Remember I said if you don't have math education, you don't have engineers, you don't have electricians. I don't know anybody in any trade that doesn't require use of some math. One of the things he's pointing out that's just as bad is that women are being promoted with no skill and no knowledge in their field, right? Charlatans wearing the title engineer. And this is bad because I do know some women who actually worked for it and do know what they're doing and are slowly climbing up and did slowly climb up the ranks over the years in areas prior to the whole DEI thing, right? But now they're just like the men. They're going to have to be dealing with these bimbos coming in that don't know what they're doing. And you might be able to get away with that in a newspaper office, right? You might be able to get away with that in the education system. Somebody might be able to camouflage themselves in as a pretend expert in systems where what they do isn't life or death. But if you have a pretend engineer working with the railway system, you have train derailments and dead people. Right? If you have a pretend engineer designing a engineer designing a transit system, or just a bridge, one bridge, you have a collapsed bridge and quite possibly dead people. And so this isn't just it's a men's issue in that men are losing their jobs, right? But it's also an issue for everybody, because when a woman put on a higher pedestal falls off of it, she takes out half the people around her. Like, it's extremely bad. And like what he's saying, he says, I'm highly experienced in track construction and welding and went to college for STEM. This woman in our gang will be in charge of our job. So he's talking about a woman who doesn't have the experience, the knowledge, or the skill being in charge of men who do. What's going to end up happening there is, first of all, they're not going to respect her, because why should they?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's going to be conflict. She's going to exploit existing law that treats it like harassment if they engage in any questioning of her authority, any questioning of her knowledge that she doesn't have, or her skill that she doesn't have, or her capability that she hasn't demonstrated, right? If they don't trust her, like if you have a man in charge and the workers don't trust him, he cannot then turn around and say, well, you just don't trust me because I'm a man. I'm going to file a lawsuit, right? He's eventually going to fail, and he's going to get fired. But if you have a woman in that situation, and the workers don't trust her, it becomes a gender issue. And she can use the human resources system against them and take out every member of her team and replace every member of her team with obedient and competent people. Well, maybe she's being respected, Night Motorcyclist, but in my experience, simps don't show respect. They just show deference. It's not the same, you know what I mean, right? but I don't think I'll be riding a train anytime soon. Jeez, not in I know where he's from, sort of, because he's said a couple of times, so that scares me. Like that's happening. I hope that in the future this changes because of the steps that Trump has taken with the government, removing DEI, and they're already trying to buck him on that, right? They're already trying to find sneaky ways around it. Like, you remember how I talked about universities when they told universities that you can't use somebody's race as a reason why they get preferential treatment in admission or in the award of grants and scholarships and stuff. So what the universities that were doing that did was they took that question out of their application process and replaced it with a request for an essay on something to do with life experiences, from which they intended to glean information that would allow them to use race as a factor in determining admission and eligibility for scholarships and grants. Exactly the same as it was before, just, a little bit under the radar. And we're already catching federal bureaucracies doing that. They're relabeling things that are still, it hasn't changed what they're doing. They're just not telling us now. So it's going to be a slog for the Trump administration to actually remove this. It's going to be like getting rid of head lice. Like, if you've ever had a situation where you've gone someplace, and especially in a thick head of hair too, like you've gone someplace or you've taken care of somebody that's gone someplace and they come back with eggs and you don't know, so 2 weeks later they've got bugs. And with head lice, you can't just, they don't just wash out. Like, you get a special shampoo that kills the bugs, but it doesn't always kill the eggs, the nits. And then you have to go through, and this is where the term nitpicking comes from. You have to go through with a comb that the teeth are so thin that only one strand of hair width fits in between them. And you put an oil in the hair, and you select very small sections of hair at a time, and you run that comb through over and over again until you get all the teeny weeny little white balls off of them. And they're tiny. They're like as small as the end of a pen, like the part that's sharp, like how long that sharp part usually is. Not usually very long. And if you don't have good glasses or you don't have good eyesight, it's very hard to see, right? And it's why Proven 22X says shave your head. That's actually why they're in old times they used to shave the heads of prisoners of war to make sure, because when you get a large number of people in a small area and they're all sleeping in a small area, the lice get in the bedding, and it just spreads through the whole bunch, right?
God.
And that's basically, I would compare DEI and the way that it has been spread throughout the federal bureaucracy. I would fully compare that to head lice. And getting it out, it's going to be like a combination of head lice and getting rid of a type of plant similar to creeping thyme, where you might kill the plant, but if its roots are not dead, it'll grow back. And yes, it's not Demetrius, it's diatomaceous earth, I think is the way it's pronounced.
Yeah.
You can put that in your hair, and it'll rip up the bugs, but it doesn't necessarily get out all the nits. You still have to go through with a fine-tooth comb if you've got somebody you're taking care of that has that. And yeah, with boys, most people will shave them bald. If their kids get lice, they'll just shave their heads. Most people, don't shave their daughters' heads. Right? Girls actually are more likely to get lice than boys too, because if your hair is dry as opposed to oily, you get it more. It's the cleaner your hair, the more likely you get it. And it's not that boys have dirty hair; it's that boys don't use as much product in their hair. So, girls actually with the long hair and they wash their hair more frequently. They're more fastidious about it. They use drying. They use hair dryers and heat treatments and stuff like that. They perm their hair. They color their hair. Their hair is like totally dried out. And something else that I had read, I don't know if it's true or not, but because of all of that processing and everything, white people get lice more. So it's possible. But yeah, it's the same people that have the weakness to DEI, right? Because women have that safety net addiction, and they have that overactive guilt gland where oikophobia takes root. And then they allow that shit in, and then you can't get rid of it. So yeah, it's not going to be easy. But it absolutely has to happen. And it's another issue that it is very much a men's issue. And women are not going to have the wherewithal or the accountability or the morality to help you with it. I wish I could say better. There might be some women on the right who are starting to listen, just based on the fact that I got sent this article. I don't want to put too much on it, but like I would put I wouldn't have said there was a chance maybe before, but I would now. But for the most part, it's going to be men versus women voting for a while. So all the guys that stepped forward to vote in this election, I'm really glad they did. But it needs to happen in every election, probably for the next for the foreseeable future. Really, I can't even put a time limit on it. And it needs to be. You're gonna have to pay attention to every issue on the ballot, every political issue, every promise, campaign promise that every politician makes, because you know that women are going to have a handful of things they pay attention to, and they're going to ignore the rest of it. And they're going to let things get as bad as this article says before they care. And even then, they might not. Right? And it can't just be men in the United States either. Guys in Canada, guys in Europe, guys in all the different countries around the world that actually have elections. This is a heads up. It's going to need to be a gendered thing for a while. And, probably a generation or two, at least. So this article goes on with what to know. In a Sunday Telegram post, Medvedev says, Deputy Chairman of the Russian Security Council and a former Russian president took aim at Biden as he criticized the president's approach to the conflict and warned that a war with NATO almost began under Biden. And I will point out, we're not sure that was the president's approach, but we're not sure that. In fact, we're pretty sure that someone else was puppeting him at that point. What did catch my attention was his unhealthy interest in Ukraine, even though he explained it to me by acting on former President Barack Obama's instructions. So, in other words, he told Russians that he was following Obama's policies. He was operating as Obama's puppet. That's what he told the Russians. If that was the case, if that was really true, I'm not sure he would have said that. But if he's dumb enough to admit it, if it is true, Like, that's even worse. That's even worse than just being a puppet. Or not being a puppet and pointing the finger to somebody. Being the puppet and admitting it openly is about the weakest thing that you can do. And it showed weakness to a nation that is... Like, if you ever play the game Risk, there's 3 types of nations, right? There's friendly nations. There's nations that are overtly aggressive, that are your enemy. And there's troublemaker nations, basically. I can't remember what they called it, aggravators or something along those lines. They may or may not be your enemy. They're like Schrodinger's enemies or Schrodinger's friends. You know, you could say it either way. Russia's like that. They're in that third group right now.
Yeah.
And they have been since the fall of the Soviet Union. And this isn't helping. Right? You don't show weakness to those people. You don't show weakness to your enemies, and you don't show weakness to people that you don't know for a fact are your friends. So, yeah, that's scary. Over time, those instructions turned into an obsession. The transformation facilitated by political mistakes, plain corruption, and poor judgment, stemming from historical ignorance and a failure to appreciate the nature of Ukraineness. At some point, the old man went off the rails and essentially unleashed a war between the collective West and Russia, which almost had led to a nuclear exchange with NATO. That's pretty open, right? That's pretty blatant. That's pretty unquestionable.
Yeah.
So that's our country being told, because he's not talking to Biden with this. Biden's out of power, right? This isn't look what you did, Mr. Biden. Right? This is intended for us and the current leadership to know. This is what almost happened. He added, he's been clearly out of it lately. While it's true that this war benefits the U.S. economically, political costs and the real danger of a fatal conflict are far more important. It is something the old dude was not prepared for. This is a case where the head of a major world power lost control of the situation completely, resulting in a crushing electoral defeat for the Democrats.
I don't understand how he says that it benefits the U.S. economically. I mean, I don't understand where he's coming from with that, because it just seems like we were just throwing money at Ukraine.
Yeah.
How does that benefit us? I mean,
that's a good question. And I'm not sure. I don't think he's talking about us like you and me. And he's probably not talking about the federal budget either. Right?
Yeah.
What he's talking about is the companies that manufacture the items that were sent over. Right?
Yes.
He's talking about the fact that our politicians can use the situation as an excuse to raise taxes to buy more of that stuff. Right? The fact that pretty much the entire industrial war complex, like the military industrial complex, is benefiting from this. So oligarchs in the United States, but not us, not American citizens, and not the country's coffers. In fact, not only are those empty, but they are full of IOUs.
Yes.
IOU, the labor of the next 3 generations is where we're at, I think, now. 3 or 4 generations. And it's to multiple other places, but mostly China. So, but going on, right, DM's remarks come after the U.S. is set to provide Ukraine an additional $500 million in weapons, $500 million in weapons, drawing from existing U.S. stockpiles. So let's reread that. To provide a foreign nation, Ukraine, an additional $500 million in weapons, drawing from existing U.S. stockpiles. All right, existing U.S. stockpiles are for our defense.
Right.
This country. So, if we have sent our weapons to Ukraine and we are attacked, what's left to use? What haven't we sent them?
We're double fucked because we just left billions of dollars in equipment and weapons in Afghanistan. So yeah. I don't even, how do we even have this much to be giving to Ukraine?
It's because Trump strengthened the military during his administration, and then Biden came in and is trying to use all of that to get into, he's sending it all to Ukraine. But when you think about this, we have a spectrum of weaponry from somewhat aggressive to very aggressive to holy shit to don't point that thing at my planet, right? And a few people maybe know what game that's a reference to, but we've sent all the middle ground, right? How much of the middle ground have we sent to Ukraine? How much have we got left in the country? Because if it's not enough to handle a war, that leaves us from, in a position of either posturing with very little aggressive capability or going all out nuclear. Here we are, trying to stave off a nuclear war. I hope we have shitloads left. But if we don't, that puts us in a position where we can't do anything unless we're willing to end the world.
Yeah.
There's a story from a long time ago. And I can't remember the details. I would have to look it up to get to remember the details. But there was an incident. I think I may have mentioned it before. There was an incident historically where there was a glitch in Russia, and it appeared that to them that we had attacked them, right? And they were in communications with the U.S., and we were assuring them that there was no attack, but it really looked like it, right?
Like War Games.
Yeah, like War Games.
I love that movie.
And one guy figured out the logic that this wasn't likely, that there were certain things that would have been done or certain things that would have happened for this to occur that hadn't, and didn't escalate, didn't retaliate. Like that's it would be a hell of a thing if we were under attack to have to decide whether to retaliate, because what you would end up with in that situation, retaliation wouldn't stop the destruction of the country.
Yeah.
It would just ensure the destruction of the country that attacked us. So Death to Zionism, Feminism, and the Thin Blue Line said his name is Stanislav Petrov. There's a couple of people who know what I'm talking about. I wish I could really remember the whole story. I'm going to have to look it up now. We're going to have to talk about it on the show another day, because this was something that, if that guy had been a little bit less rational, that would have been the end of the world. Right? And that's something that, a woman would have followed some protocol or whatever. She wouldn't have been like that. She'd have been scared. She'd have called her family, but she wouldn't have made that judgment call.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so this idea that we've sent all these weapons to Ukraine, just like that's terrifying too. The military aid authorized under presidential drawdown authority allows for expedited transfer of munitions and equipment from U.S. stockpiles to Ukraine. Senior defense official who earlier this month briefed reporters traveling with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the goal was to get those munitions into Ukraine before the end of the month, ensuring that Ukraine remains in a strong position as the administration transitions. So basically, they didn't want, while we're changing horses, that the shooting would escalate from the other side, is what they're saying. Which I can see that, but at the same time, if the situation is that bad, that indicates that the Biden administration has been doing a bad job of helping Ukraine. Right? Whatever they've been doing, it hasn't been right. Because if it had been right, we wouldn't need to make an emergency expenditure like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just days earlier, the Biden administration announced a $125 billion aid package, part of a broader effort to maximize Ukraine's military support during the final stretch of Biden's term. Officials estimate that 80 to 90% of promised equipment has already been delivered, signaling the administration's urgency to solidify its legacy of support for Ukraine. It's kind of like when you didn't do your homework, and you run from one class to the next class after the first bell rings, and you try to finish it before the second bell rings. That's basically like the first bell was the election, the second bell is the inauguration, and this is Biden trying to finish his math problems before the second bell.
Yeah.
But they don't want the war to end. And Derek Workman had it. He said it. They don't want the war to end. Death to Zionism, Feminism, and the Thin Blue Line pointed out that Stanislav Petrov's subsequent decision to disobey orders against Soviet military protocol is credited with having prevented an erroneous retaliatory nuclear attack on the United States and its NATO allies. That would have ended the war, or ended the world. That would have, if they had attacked, that would have led to all-out global nuclear war. And if you want to know how that ends, there's a book called On the Beach. I'm trying to remember the name of the author. We had to read this in high school. It's a very depressing book, I will say that. Right? It is told from the perspective of people in Australia. After all-out nuclear war. But I'm trying to remember. Neville Shute, I think is how it's pronounced. It's S-H-U-T-E. It's N-E-V-I-L-S-H-U-T-E, On the Beach. If you look up On the Beach novel, and it's published in 1957, and it's a heartbreaking book. He wrote it after he immigrated to Australia. Australia doesn't have nuclear weapons, but it's very likely that if there was a nuclear holocaust in the northern hemisphere, that every nation in the southern hemisphere would face nuclear fallout. The cloud would just go around the world.
Yeah.
I don't think there would be a place where you could go to survive it. But except maybe underground in some distant area, and you would have to have a hell of a bunker because it would have to last you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But and this is something. So Gen Xers, when we talk about this stuff and we're so blasé about it, you have to understand, we were raised by people who, during their elementary school years, were taught that ducking under their desks and covering their heads with their hands during a nuclear attack would protect them. And then grew up and learned that that was not true. Their parents built bomb shelters because of fear of nuclear attack. And when they grew up, a lot of them made their basements as bomb sheltery as they could for the same reason, and had a plan of what to do if there was a nuclear attack. And we grew up with references and commentary and jokes, everything about it in our entertainment media, in our education. It was everywhere, right? To the point where the parody songs and parody stories were written. TV shows that had as their premise, this is what life is going to be like after the big one drops, for anybody that survives and comes back out, what's going to happen after the bomb, and stuff like, if you ever listen to Weird Al Yankovic's Happy Birthday, right? Well, what's the matter, friend? You think this party is the pits? Enjoy it while you can. We'll soon be blown to bits. The monkeys in the Pentagon are gonna cook our goose. Their fingers on the button. All they need is an excuse. It doesn't take a military genius to see. We'll all be crispy critters after World War III. There's nowhere you can run to, nowhere you can hide. When they drop the big one, we all get fried. Happy birthday to you. Like, that's, 99 red balloons. Sting's song Russians. I just tweeted that one earlier today because he sang it in Russia, and it's actually a beautiful performance. And I'm not going to try to sing that because it's Sting. Come on, but yeah, it just, like, we were surrounded by that stuff. Even if it wasn't a nuclear holocaust, it was the apocalypse was imminent. The zombie movies, the Night of the Comet, some of the really weird stuff, right? And so like the prepping that happens today, like, there's a long history of that, and it goes back to Tom Lear. We will all go together when we go. Yeah, and so we're a little blasé about it just because, like, we were inundated with it our whole life, and I don't think our kids were. I don't think they had that sort of post-apocalyptic, like, all the zombie stuff and all that. Yeah, that existed, but it was almost like playtime, and I don't know if Zoomers have ever had that experience until this crisis. This is probably equal to or worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, I understand why young men turned out to vote like this. If I was a young man, like, I'd have been on that too. This is not the first time DM has warned about nuclear response during the war. He previously made headlines for regular social media rants that have ranged from calls for nuclear strikes on NATO members to suggestions that Moscow has no choice but to eliminate Zelensky. So then we have what people are saying. President Joe Biden said in a statement earlier this month, and remember this was on the 19th, so now it's former President. Former President Joe Biden said in a statement earlier this month, as I committed earlier this year, the Department of Defense has now allocated all remaining USAI funds appropriated by Congress in the supplemental that I signed in April, and my administration is fully utilizing the funding appropriated by Congress to support the drawdown of U.S. equipment for Ukraine. So in other words, he basically just said something that somebody else wrote for him that indicated that all the money that they allocated for this is being spent. That he's doing what he said he was going to do, which doesn't really address any of it. Trump-Vance transition spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt told Newsweek earlier this month, President Trump has repeatedly stated that a top priority in his second term will be to quickly negotiate a peaceful resolution to the Russia-Ukraine war. Also, President Trump believes European nations should meet their NATO defense spending obligations and step up their share of the burden for this conflict, as the U.S. has paid significantly more. Which is not fair to our taxpayers. He will do what is necessary to restore peace and rebuild American strength and deterrence on the world stage. That deterrence part, that's pretty important.
Yeah. You can't have people thinking that you can just run roughshod over this country. That's not going to fucking happen.
Yeah. I've talked a little bit about the neighborhood where I grew up, and a lot of my philosophy about other forms of violence stems from my experiences with violence in my neighborhood among, kids from preschool age all the way up to just about to graduate and just about to turn 18. Because things change when you turn 18, right? When you're under 18 and you get into a fight, unless you cause injury that requires medical treatment, parents usually handled it, right? And, if it happened to school, a lot of times the school would handle it. But unless somebody that was involved in the fight was on probation, it was handled pretty much with detention in school and stuff like that. It's a different story if somebody was on probation, then you're looking at juvie for one of the combatants if it appears they were the aggressor. All right, but when you get into a fight at the park, and there are no parents at the park, there are parents kind of glancing at the park periodically throughout the day. Maybe not yours. It's a different story. You don't just, when you get into a fight with an individual, the fight that you are fighting, the one that's like right in front of you, where another person is throwing punches at you and you are throwing punches back, that's one of two fights that you are in that moment, right? You also have another fight that you are fighting, and that is the battle to demonstrate to every other bully at that park that they don't want to put you in this situation again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shoot, what's the book? It was suggested to me by a fellow MRA who I met on Reddit, actually, shortly after I was outed as female, which everybody got really excited about that. Oh my gosh, you're female and you've said all these things. It was like, everyone should understand this stuff, but it was pretty quick to learn that most women don't, right? But this guy suggested I read Ender's Game, and I did. And I immediately liked the main character. He's like, this is a kid who is like the kids I grew up with, right? And he got into a fight. Now, I'm not going to pretend there are spoilers and non-spoilers in this story. If you haven't read this book, it's been around for a long time, so it's not a brand new novel. But there's a point in this book where Ender gets in a fight, and he takes the other kid out. He doesn't realize just how out he has taken the other kid. I want to say it was a repeat bully situation. And when he gets into that fight, his philosophy on that is he's not just fighting to win that fight. he's fighting to win every future fight by not having to have them, because he'd scare the kids that were picking on him enough that he wouldn't have to fight all of them later on. And I've done that. Right, there was a group of kids at the park that I used to hang out at, because it was 2 doors down from my house, that thought they were a gang. They weren't. They were just a bunch of dumbasses. Like most kids are a bunch of dumbasses. You have to learn a lot of things before you become an adult, and before you know those things, you're a dumbass. We are all born dumbasses.
Yes.
Right? These guys took a little longer than the other guys in the neighborhood to not be dumbasses. And 4 of them decided that they were going to pick on me. We had the swing set at this park. It had, like, there was the one end that had a baby swing. And then there were a couple of sections that had 2 swings in each section, side by side. And then there was the last section that was wide enough for 2 swings, but they had just put 1 swing in the middle. Since that swing was different, it was a novelty. So if there were more kids wanting to swing on the swings than there were swings, the kids would fight over that swing. Even if there weren't, sometimes the kids would fight over that swing. When I went that day, there was nobody at the park. I showed up when the weather wasn't very nice, and early in the morning, because I was an early bird, like 6 a.m. kind of early bird. And so I was out playing on that swing and not paying attention, and all of a sudden I realized I was surrounded by like 4 of these bullies. And that scared the crap out of me. Like, I didn't really know what I was going to do in that moment, right? And they were all telling me that I have to get off the swing, and they're going to take it, and when I get off the swing, they're all going to beat me up, and all kinds of, the same stuff that you hear from bullies everywhere. We're going to kick your ass as soon as you get down. And they were all bigger than me. So I actually, for once, was genuinely scared. Usually I was just upset. I didn't want to do this, and it was, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to leave. And I would try, and I would end up in a fight anyway, because when you try to walk away from a bully, they will come after you almost every time. Until you have demonstrated that they shouldn't. And so these guys, since there were 4 of them, and since I was the smallest of the bunch, I came up with a plan. Instead of stopping, like they said, I started swinging higher. And of course they're all, oh, you're going to try to jump and run away. You're going to have to come down sometime. We're going to get you, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, like, I realized I couldn't jump and just run away from them, because I was asthmatic. I would get about 15 or 20 feet and start slowing down. And they were going to outrun me in 2 seconds. So I was going to have to do something else, right? So I had space around me. I could twist myself around back and forth and make the swing move around back and forth without actually hitting the bars. So I did. And that gave me a bit of an ability to kick. And I kicked every single one of those guys in the head. I knocked 2 of them out. And then I jumped and ran. I kind of thought, I knocked all of them down. So I thought maybe if they had to get up and then chase me, and they were maybe, struggling a little bit, then I might have a chance to actually get away from them. But an older guy that kind of knew the history of how the equipment in that park got put there, stopped them and lectured them, like, for all he was worth, and just pretty much saved my butt. Because those guys probably would have chased me down. The 2 that were up right away probably would have chased me down. When I turned around, all 4 of them were sitting down. He was yelling at all of them. But it did create a situation, like, I heard back from other kids later that all 4 of those boys gave 2 reasons when they said not to pick on me later. One of them was that guy, who was a friend of our family, and he knew that the history was that park was one of the reasons that the Republicans asked my mom to run for city council as our ward councilman when I was growing up. She had gotten a bunch of moms together and cleaned up that park, and then she went to the city and pointed out, this park has been an eyesore for this long, and this stuff's wrong with it, and so on. Got them to agree that if she could get equipment donated, that they would maintain that park like they did the ones on the money side of town. And so then she went around to the Eagles and the Kiwanis Club and, all the little, Royal Order Buffalo clubs that in the Flintstones they don't actually do anything, right? But in the real world they do. She got them to donate equipment, and the city helped install it, and the city maintained that park after that, and that swing set was part of that equipment, and he knew that. He was aware of it because he was old enough. He remembered when he was our age, that park was not a place to play. So, but it was, the other end of it was they told about getting knocked out. And I didn't have to deal with any more guys from their group picking on me after that.
I love that.
That was, they didn't want to get kicked in the head again. Right? And there was one of the few times, like, I still felt bad about it. Because I worried later. I don't know how bad that kind of, like, that's a concussion. When you get knocked out, that's a concussion.
Yeah.
So I had a few from fights growing up in that park, and I handed out a few. So, all of us that grew up there. But you do learn. There's two things you learn from a situation like that. Violence is a shitty means of negotiation by itself. But the other thing that you learn is that you have alternatives and you should use them. Especially if you get into a situation where the other guy is the one who can knock you out. So it's important that we negotiate with countries like this from a position of strength. If an aggressor thinks they can win a fight, they have no incentive, right, to do anything but fight.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to make them wonder, can I win this fight? Or make them afraid, I can't win this fight. If you want to have peace. It's unfortunate, but that's the way of the world. You have to understand, if you want peace in a world where aggressors exist, you have to have deterrence. There has to be a consequence for aggression, and the consequence has to come from the target.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely right.
Yeah. I didn't look up how to pronounce this guy's name. Russia's defense minister, Andrei Belousov, I hope that's correct, warned in December of direct conflict between Moscow and NATO within the next decade. Preparing for war has been shown by the decisions made at NATO summit, held in July of this year. He added that Moscow must be prepared for any development, including a possible military conflict with NATO in Europe in the next decade. When asked about Belousov's comments, the Pentagon told Newsweek in a statement in December that the United States condemns irresponsible, escalatory rhetoric. U.S. Department of Defense spokesperson Javan Ransky, no, that's Raznik, sorry, dyslexia, told Newsweek in December that the United States and NATO do not seek a military conflict with Russia. Right? So why are we giving weapons to a country that's in a military conflict with Russia?
Oh, God. It's just so fucking tiresome. It really is. I mean, because it's. I think the part that really frustrates me is that it's so obvious that what we're doing is protecting our money laundering scheme by giving money to Ukraine, and why? Well, because they don't know. They don't pay attention. That's why they don't understand that that's what this is.
Yeah.
But we don't want no smoke with Russia. We leave Russia alone. Let them do what the hell they're gonna do. I just leave them alone. Why is anybody trying to poke that fucking bear? That's just beyond me. But
Yeah, I look at this and I'm trying to figure out the logic for trying to maintain enmity. Even if we didn't, like, we don't have to become best friends as nations with Russia. We don't have to treat Russia like Canada,
yeah.
which Canada hasn't been a very good friend for a while.
No.
Like, I know some Canadians that have, but their administration, which they're not satisfied with, hasn't been so good.
Yeah.
But we've had many countries we've had peaceful relationships with that our interests aren't the same. They align in some ways. We can negotiate trade and respect each other's boundaries and stop there. Like, that's all we have to do. It doesn't have to be complicated. And we don't have to be trying to take each other down. So I don't understand the making it a goal to never make peace with Russia. The only possible reason that I can think of behind that is that there are people making money from maintaining that conflict, that military-industrial complex.
Absolutely right.
Like, so I guess my thinking is we are doing the opposite right now, speaking softly and carrying a big stick. We've been a loudmouth little brat handing sticks and rocks to a combatant in a fight and expecting the other combatant to not get mad at us for it.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens next? We don't know. We'll have to wait until we find out what Trump's going to do. This says, while it is unclear what Trump will do once in office regarding sending aid to Ukraine, Biden continues to make a last-minute push to ship weapons to Ukraine amid concerns that the incoming administration may halt military hardware deliveries to the country. And I hope they do. I hope they do halt military hardware. And this, I think they intended this to be an anti-Trump article.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I do. I really do. It clearly demonstrates that the Biden administration has been weak, prolonged a war that should have been over in months. If it happened at all, right? It should never have happened in the first place, and is actually trying to get the United States dragged into it, and that Trump may put a stop to that. It's just that the writer seems to be expressing some sort of aversion to that outcome.
Yeah.
I mean, am I reading it wrong? It does strike me that that's what they were intending it to be, anti-Trump. But the information in it is pretty. It's pretty hard to spin. Well, Biden almost caused a nuclear war, and damn it, Trump's going to put a stop to that. Like, what?
Oh Come on, guys. Trump's bad. Don't you know? He's just trying to stop a fucking war from happening. My God.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little. It's that Newsweek. What the hell, man? You understand that your offices are not radiation proof.
You're right.
Jeez, Pete. So, when we see stuff like this, and it's again, I'm gonna go back to the fact that this was sent to me by a right winger, who is not a men's rights activist, who pointed out I don't follow the men's rights stuff, but and pointed this out as a men's issue. I'm not. The men's issue is not a right or left wing thing, and it shouldn't be specifically a wing thing of any kind, right? It's about men's human rights, and it's about men's boundaries and men's lives and respect for who and what men are as human beings. Right? But this is the first outreach I've seen from either side in regard to valuing men as preventers of war and the people whose lives would be on the line in war, as not being disposable. Like, this is the first time I've seen somebody send me something like that with a statement like that and not be at least MRA adjacent. Left and right within the movement, they all recognize this, but outside the movement, the left doesn't recognize it at all. And it's nice to see that somebody does. And I can't say she speaks for the whole right, but she definitely it was definitely interesting to see that. So I hope, for us as a movement, I think that it does indicate that. Remember, I was talking previously on other episodes about, now that we've seen a change of administration, like I said, it's hope, it's not a guarantee, but we all need to get in there and start communicating, writing letters to Congress, writing letters to the president, writing letters to our local politicians, and encouraging them to make legal and social changes, that respect the rights, the human rights of men.
Yeah, amen.
We have a chance at changing things. And, we don't know how big our window is. It could be 4 years. It could be longer. I hope it's longer. But, we should operate as though it's 4 years. In fact, we should operate as though it's 2 years.
Yeah.
So, with that, this is pretty much all I wanted with this was to point out just how close to doomsday we got on the doomsday clock. Like, we started out the year at something like 90 seconds from midnight.
Yeah.
And then this was earlier this month. We started out last year at 90 seconds to midnight. This was earlier this month. So I don't know what the report... I think the report on the doomsday clock comes out the 28th. We'll see what they have to say.
Okay. Yeah.
But
cool.
But yeah. When people talk about their votes not mattering, guys, women are voting. Therefore, your votes matter a hell of a lot.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how young you are, how close to just hitting voting age you are, or how old you are. They're not paying attention, so it's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that, this was a pretty heavy article. It wasn't so much dry as it was, the information in it's kind of... my hair on my arms has been standing up the whole time.
Yeah.
This shit, it's deja vu all over again, right? It scares you, to think that you might be going back to that time.
Yeah.
And I hope that changes. So.
I mean, I think it will. I'm full of nothing but why can't I think of the word that was on my tongue? I'm
Optimism?
Yes,
Oh,
thank
good.
you. Very optimistic. Why did I lose that word? Oh my God.
We don't get to use it very much.
Like, yeah, yes, but it's a feeling that I haven't felt in a long time. Maybe that's why I couldn't fucking think of the word, but it's I'm just waiting for things to happen. Like, he's signing executive orders and things like that. So, the wheels are turning, and it's not going to happen immediately on day one, but things are going to start turning around. And I really do believe that, we're going to get back on track
Yeah.
from where we left off from his last presidency, I'm just really excited and really hopeful for the future, because it is true what they were saying, that if he had lost this election, then there just wouldn't be another chance for Republicans to take hold, for probably for the rest of our lifetimes. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So it's just, I don't even know what to say. I'm still like blown away that this is even happening, right? But it is, and he's back, and we're here, and so we've got probably closer to 2 years, but at least we have 2 years to start to right the ship. So I'm just very excited, and I'm here for all of it.
Yeah, me too. I like I said, I do have hope, and I didn't before, so that's good.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I do have hope. And yeah, Freedom Cast has made a really good point. The respective intelligence agencies, he says, play it like a game. Hope we can fix that. And he said Cold War needs to conclude. We don't see the reasoning anymore. And those are both true. I think Gen X really needs to make sure that happens. The boomers didn't. Although Trump, technically, he's a boomer. So maybe some boomers will help with that. But failing at commenting says, if you die in the game, you die in real life. Yeah. In this game, yeah. So yeah, that's something that may be up to us. But I still think that millennial and Zoomer men, we can bring them into the Gen X fold, even if the women don't come with them. And yep, there's a big pile of shit in the middle of the street. Guess whose turn it is to clean? Let's grab a shovel, and off we go.
Let's go.
And yeah, Derek Workman says there are concerns with Trump, but at least we can take a breath of relief that the whole world will calm down, and that's the fact, right? I'm still waiting to find out what he means when he talks about cryptocurrency, because cryptocurrency completely under government control is a bad thing.
Yeah, well, so somebody was talking about it earlier today, and I really don't know if he has such a good grasp on it, but basically what he's talking about is this stable coins, right? That's what they're calling it, stable coins, but they're backed by the US dollar. Yeah. So it's I don't think he knows what he's doing when it comes to crypto, and that's probably a good thing. Maybe he should just stay away from it.
Yeah,
it's not his milieu.
Yeah, the thing that it wouldn't bother me for there to be a type of crypto that had that's not, that's okay. It's just, does the administration interfere with every other type of crypto
Right.
in order to stabilize that.
Right.
Because there is a direct line from federal control over crypto to social credit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anybody that thinks there isn't paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we will see.
Yeah.
We will see.
We will see. But everything else that I've seen so far, has been good. So, so far. Crossing fingers. I never hold my breath, but I have hope. And with that, that's about as white-pilled as we're going to get. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Like I said, this was heavy, pun intended, for those of you who are nerds. And thanks, you guys, for sticking this out with me. And good night, all.
Good night, y'all.
Men's right activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.